Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Stream Time Sports. I'm your host Nick Meacham, doing a very special episode of the podcast here in Düsseldorf at the Merkur Spiel Arena for Sports Innovation 2026. I've been talking to lots of people across the event and on stage, but you're going to hear a little bit more from one of the most important companies perhaps in the sports and sports media landscape, and that is AWS and what they're doing both with the Bundesliga and also with global sports properties like the NFL, F1, PGA Tour, and loads more. In this episode, you're going to hear from two different people. You're going to hear from Joanna Prestel, who is the Global Sports Partnership Lead from AWS, talking specifically about the details of the Bundesliga relationship, and also from Julie Souza, who is the Global Head of Sports of AWS, talking more widely about the relationships they have with all sorts of major sports properties like the NFL, F1, PGA Tour, and so on. So I'm here with Joanna Prestel, who is the Global Sports Partnership Lead at AWS. And AWS's major partnership when it comes to sports, really, at least from my view, is the Bundesliga relationship. And she's going to give us a bit of an insight into the dynamics of that partnership. So, Joanna, welcome to,
Hi.
I guess, Sports Innovation and also to Sports Pro. Take us a little bit of a look into the relationship, the partnership that has existed for quite a while now. What are some of the particulars and specifics about that relationship that can set the scene for how AWS works with the Bundesliga?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here at the event and talking to you about our partnership. AWS and Bundesliga have been partners since 2020. And what I really love about this partnership is that it's a technology partnership, right? But we don't develop technology for technology's sake. So we really always have the same vision of innovation and really always working backwards from the fan. What is the challenge of the fan, or how can we add value for the fan? And I think that's what makes this partnership very special. And that's also represented with the flagship use cases we developed together. And happy to talk about those. But yeah, that's basically...
I think it's sometimes lost on people about the fact that the Bundesliga takes a lot of the responsibility of that glass-to-glass distribution.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is obviously very different to a lot of the other European football leagues, and indeed most of the football leagues right across the world. You obviously help a lot with enabling that. So talk us through some of the specifics of the partnership that you are enabling basically the Bundesliga to achieve with their technology and broadcast.
Yeah, 100%. Because they are so independent, we're actually able to help them innovate much more than other leagues, right? So first of all, what we did when we started the partnership is really the foundation, right? The data. Like, how can we look at these 150,000 hours of 6 years of Bundesliga footage, video footage, right? And how can we put that in the cloud and make sense of it? And how can we, create flagship use cases like Bundesliga Match Facts? So that is actually the first flagship use case we created, where we analyzed 3.6 million data points per game and offer that to the fan during the live match in the broadcast, but also in the app. And that's where the value comes back, right? Because it's not just a fact that we can look at, but it really creates context for the fan. So I don't know if you know the Bundesliga Match Facts.
Yeah. I think we've talked about it a little bit on the pod, but give us a bit of could you just talk us through what it is and
Yes.
and the nuance between when you say, I guess, we in that, like what is the dynamic when you say we? Is it in collaboration? Is it AWS playing the role in looking at that data, or
Yes.
is it more that you're just helping Bundesliga have access to that data?
Yeah, so it's really both. So we have 16 till 20 cameras in each Bundesliga stadium. And within 1 second, we analyze 25 points per player. And we capture that data. And thanks to AWS serverless architecture, that is captured in the Bundesliga Data Hub. And under 1 second, we analyze that with data analytics, machine learning, and make sense of the data, right? And that's how we collaborate and then integrate that into the live feed and into the Bundesliga app. And then, for instance, I think the easiest example is if you have Harry Kane scoring a goal, and it's just a likelihood of, like, the goal probability was like 2%. And that's something where a fan is like, wow, that makes that moment special, right? Like, you think about, wow, that's very, very low. And that gives the fan context and value. And the same goes for like giving context throughout the season, not just saying, hey, this was the fastest player in that moment of the game, but actually of the entire season. And that, again, creates a lot of value for the fan to interact with the live game.
So you're helping them get access to a lot more data than
Yes.
they ever have, and the things like the match fact is a way of, I guess, translating the nerdy data
Yeah.
and metadata and the like that is created by that and translating it into fan speak. Is that how you would describe a lot of basically the enablement of when you have all the access to the information?
100%. I think it goes both ways, right? Because we have Bundesliga match facts that are integrated in the broadcast that are more the easy effects to understand for people who might not be as data driven or as tech savvy, but still are interested in these numbers. And then we have match facts that go a little bit deeper, where fans can dive into in more detail in the app or on the website. And I think we serve all kinds of fans in that way, right?
Absolutely. So just curious, talk us through some of the other examples
Yes.
of where AWS is I guess, bringing that technology to the fore.
Yeah, so I mean, one big challenge for all sports leagues is content localization, right? Like if you think about Bundesliga, they have 1 billion fans worldwide, 509 million actually in Asia, but currently the game is only produced in English and German. So, however, the leagues, they're not big organizations, right? They cannot just like add resources. So that's really where our work comes in as well. Like, how can AI help to localize content immediately, live game, post game, etc. So we do have these content. One project we have is called Content OS, where we automatically translate content from live game and post game for these 75 plus partners Bundesliga works with internationally to really give access to the game for fans that usually wouldn't.
So one thing that is difficult for people to get their head around, particularly around sports and partnerships, is where the lines draw and who does what.
Yeah.
Because I see AWS as like the roads, the architecture, the infrastructure underneath that's enabling
That's true, yeah.
Bundesliga to do the work. What are you doing and what are you not doing in terms of, for people to understand the delineation there of Bundesliga's role in creating all that? Are they coming to you with a problem and saying, and you give them a guide of like, all right, here's how you build it on our infrastructure? Or how much are you having to take actually the ownership of developing that?
Yeah. So we do most of the development, but what we we are doing everything collaboration, right? So what we usually do is we work backwards from the fan, or we work backwards from our customer, and we create these PRFAQs, so really these press releases of products, like what is the end result we want to achieve, and then we work backwards from that solution. Say, okay, what is actually the technology we need for that, right? And that is something that how we work at AWS with our partners, and we work with Bundesliga in that way as well. And then it really depends per project, to be honest. Yeah. I think one really sexy project that we're very proud of is also Bundesliga Stories, for instance. It's another content scale example where Bundesliga creates around like 4,000 articles per season, like long form articles. But nowadays, fans require these short form, snackable content, right? And there again, Bundesliga doesn't have the resources to expand their team. So we work with our Amazon Bedrock, Amazon Recognition, right? We analyze these 4,000 articles and we create them in like snackable AI stories, right? And that's something that is in the Bundesliga app. They create 400 stories a month in the app with that, with amazing results. So that's one great example.
That is a great example. And it feels like that the whole industry is really focused on content creation and management now.
It's one focus, right?
It's one focus, but it's a pretty big one because everyone's trying to engage audiences.
Correct.
Can you give any insight as to how automated is that? Are the Bundesliga having to still manage it with people, or is it able to be fully automated?
It's almost fully automated. It could be fully automated, but Bundesliga wants to have like that final check because it's their content in the Bundesliga app, right? Which is like their biggest outlet to fans and access to fans. This whole process from the article screening, identifying the right image of the player of that game with the right title, and creating that snackable piece of content is done automatic in under 1 minute. And then the Bundesliga editor can look at it and say, okay, final go. Let's put in the app.
And final question, is there any other examples of where AWS is being used by the Bundesliga that you'd want to share and point out as an example of the partnership?
Yeah, we have something in the making right now, which is really exciting. We're launching that for the World Cup. It's Captain. It's called it's like an AI companion in the Bundesliga app, because we have seen, again, working backwards from the fan, to that fans are juggling during a live game. Like they look in chats, they look at the stats, and then they see the live game. But it's really fragmented, the experience. So we all put that in one place in the Bundesliga app, where you can ask all kind of statistical questions, where the AI companion is really helping you to understand the moment, the match, the situation. And that's perfectly for the World Cup, also for new fans who don't know football that well. So that's something that we're really excited about, yeah.
I mean, for those that are following the journey of different European football leagues, the Bundesliga is really the pioneer in many aspects around technology and broadcast production and content. So big thank you, Joanna,
so much for
sharing
having
some more
me.
insight
Yes.
around the AWS component of that and letting us a little insight into how it all works. So you've just heard from Johanna about the Bundesliga relationship. Now we hear from Julie Souza about AWS more widely, right after this.
What's happening now and next in sports tech? As AI adoption accelerates rapidly, the inaugural Global Sports Tech Report from SportsPro and Sportradar reveals which technologies and trends are driving real business impact across 6 core areas of sport. Informed by a global survey of senior executives and insights from leading tech and sport organizations, the report offers a 360-degree view of what's working today and where the industry is headed tomorrow. Access the full report via the SportsPro website.
So I'm joined by Julie Souza, who is the Global Head of Sports for AWS. And we're going to take a little bit of an insight into the various, and there's plenty of them, examples of the relationships that AWS has with different sports properties right across the industry. So, Julie, welcome to SportsPro. Welcome to the Sports Innovation event. How have you found it so far?
I love this conference. I love it so much. We get to see technology and innovation in action. So it's one of my favorites.
A lot going on out there, that is for sure. Now, I want to take a look at some of the examples, as I mentioned earlier, that you're seeing, that you're involved with across the different sports, because it feels like AWS is kind of everywhere, pulling a lot of strings for a lot of different sports properties, whether it be international or US based. So can you share some examples and perhaps learnings from those relationships you have?
Yeah. So we're fortunate to work with some really fantastic global sports properties, Bundesliga being one of them, and why we're here. We work with the PGA Tour, with Formula One, the NFL, the NBA. It's an impressive and distinguished list that we are privileged to work with, and the use cases vary, right? We like to say we work backwards from our customers' problems or challenges. So whether it's the NFL with player health and safety, or it's driving fan engagement through analytics or other means, we're sort of up for that challenge and really try to position ourselves not as a technology vendor, but as an innovation partner to those leagues.
So there's a lot of major players you mentioned already off the cusp. They all need different things. Sometimes you've taken a partnership sponsor-led approach where you're really enabling the visibility of the AWS brand. Others are very behind the scenes, pulling a lot of strings, giving them the infrastructure to make things happen. So just give us some specific examples of some of those things, particularly the US examples you shared, of how what are some specific, I guess, products or outcomes they're trying to achieve by working with you?
Yeah. Also, so I'll start with maybe the NFL.
Yep.
Because there are a lot of different things we work on with them. One is their analytics platform, Next Gen Stats. So those are analytics that drive understanding and engagement with fans, and that's pulling data off of the field and off of the players to be able to create those insights. But also, it's a high contact sport with a lot of injury. So another challenge that we have tried to address with them is around player health and safety, and capturing, again, even a more granular level of data to help inform player health and safety initiatives. And I think I would love to dive a little deeper on that one.
Please.
Because it was such a pronounced business problem, right? We have high rates of concussion, lower extremity injury rates. How do we lower those rates? And with the data that's being captured, and I think so many of these use cases actually come down to how do you capture and analyze data to make decisions, right? Pulling this data in and being able to identify plays that were more injurious, and watching the NFL actually change rules in its game to address that. It was remarkable. 2 years ago, there was a kickoff, which happens, and they found that play caused 2 times the injury rate and 4 times the concussion rate over a normal pass or run play. Also, they found that the kickoff was not actually being returned into an exciting play. So it was a boring play that caused a lot of injuries. so they decided to use machine learning and all of this data to simulate 10,000 seasons worth of data to optimize for lower injury rates and a higher return rate. And they changed the rules in American football based on that data. And what they saw was exactly what that sort of machine learning modeled out. The injury rates normalized. And last season, they had 74.5% greater returns. So a more exciting game as a result, well, obviously making it a safer play for athletes. So I just think examples like that where we can tangibly point to like real value being driven off of the use of data in really strategic ways, that's super exciting.
That's a pretty incredible example, and Sharon, for those that maybe aren't NFL fans, and I'm one who does watch quite a lot of it, has been quite a change to the way the kickoffs and the dynamic of that experience has been delivered now. How far can you, I don't know where you can take us here, but to do that modeling, what goes into that? Is it you guys hand over a tool or a laptop and say, all right, it's all set up now to model and go for it? Or are they giving you some criteria and you're chucking this AI-led ML machine that does all the dirty work and comes back and spits out a big number? Just talk us through how that outcome actually happens out, because you hear simulation, and I get the thought of video game simulations where you see something play out. Is that kind of, how far does it go?
Well, I think, again, it's interesting to think about, like, it goes back to, first of all, the data capture, right? So it used to be that, they still do, capture data from chipping the players. Mm-hmm. So each of the shoulder pads and the football itself are chipped. And so that's collecting data. But they've also installed cameras in the venues, and they're collecting a much more granular, about 29 points on the body every 60 seconds is the amount of data that's being pulled off of the athletes in the game, right? And so first of all, it's organizing and storing all of that data. And then, yes, you're developing models to help simulate different things. And it's a very collaborative process. The NFL is involved with their data scientists and their partners in that space. We obviously have deep understanding and proficiency and expertise in machine learning and models and simulation tools and sort of the predictive nature of these things. So it's a very collaborative process, and that's what makes it work, actually. It's not just, we'll take it away and come back to you with an answer, and it's also not just give us your tools and leave us alone. It's very much how do we work together, knowing what the objective is we're trying to solve for.
So when I hear the term data, I think a lot of people will think about traditional statistics that are created, maybe some of the betting and data agencies that service and create content and data around that. What's the difference? When you talk about data, it's definitely not the same type of conversation we're having there. Can you just talk about the differences between those different buckets or pools of data that you're capturing versus maybe the traditional data sets that the industry and consumers might be seeing?
Yeah. So first of all, data, I usually use that to mean all content, really. All content is data. Video is data, analytics are data. I always say when I started off as a young sports fan, the raw data of sports was a box score. And it's exactly what you're describing, that which people could see and observe, right? Percentage, completions or goals or things they're very obvious. The level of granularity we get off of tracking data now, that raw data is X's and Y's and Z's. It's literally like degrees of latitude and longitude. So if you're looking at it as a fan, it makes no sense, right? It actually requires the application of machine learning to be able to understand those analytics or those data points in relation to one another and then contextualize them. So it's a much deeper level now. And it can sound a little off-putting, I think, sometimes, like, oh gosh, all this data, it's very heady, whatever. Everybody's sort of doing that now, and it's getting easier and easier to capture this data. And I think it's the expectation of fans, truthfully, now. People expect to have insights that help them understand the game better. And I think it's really important for leagues to embrace it because you're always sort of getting the next generation of fans, right? And so that means two things. One, speaking to them the way they want to be spoken to. And the next generation of fans, they are tech savvy, they are data literate. But also, how do you use this to edify an audience and teach them about the sport so that it doesn't feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to get involved because I don't know the rules, or if you can make fans feel smarter about what they're watching, they'll watch more of it.
They sure will. And I've noticed AWS's data points being shared in a lot of major broadcasts in F1 and in the NFL and the like. And normally they are new data points that didn't actually exist until now, until AWS has been involved. Outside of the let's call them the more sexier points of which is data, which I'm not sure. It sounds like a counterintuitive line.
I think data's sexy.
What are some of the maybe less obvious things that might be standing out that are actually having a major business impact? Because I think of AWS as, again, that infrastructure part that is quite transformative to an organization if you get that right?
Right.
I don't know if I'm trying to work out a metaphor here, but I can't really work out what the best way to describe that is. So what are some of those things that might not get the coverage on the broadcast, but have been really influential, I suppose, in impacting some of those sports properties you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it is that infrastructure layer that allows you to really organize all of your data, which again is any sort of content. And we've been talking a lot about the data that comes out of sport, but equally there's a tremendous amount of data about sports fans, and they're transacting and demonstrating their fandom in a lot of different ways. And so how do leagues or properties or teams, clubs capture that data and develop insights from it so that they can speak more directly in a more personalized way, right? And I think that's sort of this next frontier. People expect more personalization out of their content now. And so how does sports rise to that occasion? And how do you speak to a fan? Julie as a sports fan is different than Nick as a sports fan. And so how do we speak to each other in ways that lets each fan feel seen, heard, valued? And when you can do that and create that connection and make a fan feel valued, they're going to be a more avid fan.
So is that those sorts of data points are you referring to, obviously, like things around consumption in particular?
Sure.
What are some examples?
E-commerce, merchandise, subscription products, betting, fantasy. There's so many different touch points for fans to express their fandom. How do you pull that all together? We had a property that had, it was the NFL. They had 90 billion rows of fan data, but really only visibility into 12 million fans. So they had all of this disparate, fractured, duplicative data. And they really went through this exercise of structuring that data and creating a single unified view of each fan. And when they went through that exercise, visibility from 12 million went to 70 million. And with 70 million fans, they were able to do a little bit more persona-based marketing, and they saw 2 to 3 times of increase in open rates and things like that. So you got more engagement as you started to get more personalized, even on a persona basis. Now imagine that at a hyper-personalized one-to-one basis, you're going to see real tangible business results from that.
For sure. So NFL's obviously the best of the best, the biggest, depending on which metrics you use in terms of sports properties. And that's 90 billion data points is a lot of data points. For those that are maybe challenger sports, the tier beneath, or a couple tiers beneath those major properties that we touched upon earlier, the idea of getting their data in order is, I think, for most business people now is understood as a must do. Yet it's quite a overwhelming kind of thought process to try and get aligned with all the different platforms we've got. Talking first-hand experience here of somebody who runs a media company, I've been wanting to get all my data in place for one time, and it's been easier said than done. Just talk us through how is AWS able to therefore make that happen for those small properties? Because some people will just go, oh, well, the NFL's doing it, but I'm not the NFL, right?
Right. No, I mean, I think it's very accessible now because you used to have to invest in infrastructure that sometimes, server racks and things like that, this capital expense that made it sort of hard, especially what are we going to do with this data? How are we going to monetize this data? It made it a little bit speculative for them. I think you're right. People understand the value of data now, but still that capital expense makes it, you're making decisions there. Now with cloud services like AWS, you're able to turn, CapEx to OpEx. So you're only using only paying for what you use when you use it. And so it's not this always on thing that's draining. It's become much more economical. And then you obviously can avail yourself of resources to help you understand, well, what do we do with this data? How do we exploit it to drive business value? So I think people, and I do think this allows some of those challenger brands you're talking about to leapfrog. Those that really lean in and get to these super personalized experiences, I think they have an opportunity to sort of carve a really powerful niche for themselves.
So you get approached by a challenger sport who's looking to take the next step. Could be older, could be newer as well. There's different case studies or reasons why someone would look at these types of things. That notion of like trying to get the justification to start committing to investment in their infrastructure, their systems, is sometimes it sounds obvious. Sometimes it's really hard to get buy-in from your stakeholders, investors, owners to do so. Is there anything you're able to do to help them navigate that challenge? Because obviously it's in your best interest for them to understand and be able to get that commitment as well.
I think it goes back, it's a nice full circle to the where we started the conversation, which is, what challenges are they trying to solve, right? Oftentimes it's, yes, we don't really have a handle on our fan data. Well, if you don't have handle on your fan data, then you can't really speak to them in a way that's going to get them to act the way you want them to, right? Yeah. So it's always going back to what's the business challenge we're trying to solve here. And so we like to start there. We don't start with technology. I never do. I start with what business problem are we trying to solve? And then is technology the right answer? What technology? And certainly, the answer is generally yes. Technology can play a role here, and then how do we help? How do we help you do that? But I've said repeatedly, technology for technology's sake is not interesting. Technology that solves a business problem, that drives fan engagement, that drives operational efficiency, that drives revenue opportunities, that's interesting.
So what are some of the main areas that are those business challenges that you're getting approached about? I'm guessing it's about operational efficiency. I'm guessing it's a lot to do with media, content, creation, management. Yeah. Are they really the main? And of course, just generally sorting out the data side of things. Are there anything specifically that you would point to as like either maybe trends that are getting focused on right now, or just topics that you're talking more and more about that are more of a priority?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot. I mean, personalization is a big trend. Globalization is a big trend in sport. And we see that. I mean, this is a very global conference where we are right now, right? So I think those are trends that call for technology and, and support in that area. I think you touched on content creation, and I'll speak very quickly to an example with PGA Tour, though Bundesliga has done a lot in this space as well. But PGA Tour, they have about 156 golfers in a tournament, and to produce content on every single golfer is not economically or logistically feasible, right? But now with the data they are extracting off the golf course, they can use that data and generative AI capabilities to create content so that every player's got sort of a pre-tournament article, mid-tournament view, a post-match. So they've got all of this content that is being created dynamically through generative AI, and that content didn't exist before. So fans who were really excited about a particular player that's from their country or whatever, if that player wasn't on the leaderboard, there wasn't really that much content about them. And so now it's allowing the PGA Tour to super serve fans and sort of quench that insatiable thirst for content in a really economical, scalable way that frankly just wouldn't be possible without technology and generative AI capabilities.
I can imagine. And you talked about generative AI. Let's talk about AI for a second, a little bit further. I'm sure it's coming up quite a bit for you. What's the lay of the land from your point of view, or AWS's point of view with regards to AI? Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? Is it about right? The amount of conversation around its use and impact to the sports industry. What are you seeing?
I think we're still in early days, but there is tremendous, tremendous value and potential there. And I think that, it's change, right? How do we use technology in new ways? And anytime with change, there's a change management element, getting people comfortable and proving out the value. But we are seeing real impact, whether it's driving down, operational efficiencies, creating new content, scaling content for new markets, right? Even localization capabilities. And Bundesliga did actually, we were here 2 years ago and they were talking about using data to create text commentary and do it in multiple languages and multiple personas. That was all leveraging AI capabilities. So we are still early days, but I think there's going to be we've already seen about a tremendous amount of value unlocked, and I think we're just scratching the surface.
How are you finding that the sports properties you work with and talk with, their willingness and excitement in evolving and innovating and trying new things? I get a sense sometimes when I talk to people that there's still a hesitation or a fear of upsetting stakeholders, upsetting fans, or do you think that is improving from the conversations you're having now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be very careful. I often say just because we can doesn't mean we should. So it's like the artful application of technology that it and how it helps improve the experience and not distract from the experience. And I think sometimes I've gotten into quite passionate conversations about the use of like virtual reality in a venue. I don't think it belongs there. I don't. I mean, I think you go to a sporting event because it is communal and haptic and sensory and, and you want to be in the moment. And so then to create a sort of isolated experience for somebody who's in a communal environment, I think is antithetical to the ethos of live sport. So I think we always have to have that in our minds too, does this enhance or does it detract in some ways? Yeah. And, some people, I've also heard people come and say, oh, especially with the rule changes around the NFL, you have purists like, what are you doing here? Why are we changing this? Then the data is going to ruin everything. And my response to that is, well, all right, we know that this play, there was a particular play called the hip drop tackle, caused 20 times the injury rate. And my response is, if we know that now, well, why in God's name would we continue to allow that to happen, right? Of course they're going to change the rules. Of course they're going to ban that play from happening because the incentives are aligned around that. Players want to be on the field showing their athletic prowess. The owners who pay a lot of money for those players want them on the field. Fans want their favorite players on the field. So I think, finding those the right applications of technology and being able to prove the value of it, that's the sweet spot.
So one of the things that sticks out with me is AWS and many tech companies in and around sports use sports as a great platform to showcase their wares. AWS is probably the leading one that started that trend, I think, in many instances. And now you see it right across the industry where major tech players are using sports as a case study, as a way of showcasing the extent and the power of what they can offer. With that, you are investing a lot of resource, also financially, around sponsorships, as well as all these different aspects to it. How do you think that's paying off, that commitment of effort and energy into doing it? Because it is a big commitment, and I see a lot of tension around this in sports generally, because sports are looking to innovate, but they're also not sure who and what to work with in general terms, and I think sometimes that can limit. But when you're someone like AWS driving a lot of this change forward, you're kind of there using this as a nice platform to showcase why everyone should be working with you, not just in sports, but indeed outside. So I'm trying to set the scene there, but how do you find that dynamic is the investment of basically using sport as this showcase, is it paying off directly for AWS?
I love that question. So AWS, yes, we do have marketing partnerships with some, I think, really phenomenal global properties. And we're strategic about who we're partnering with and why. And it's the reason we do it is because it does, to your question, allows us to tell really powerful and sometimes complex technical stories in a way that are really accessible for folks to understand. I don't mean to keep using the NFL as an example, but we've done a lot of different work with them. And for example, they, setting their schedule for every season is something that took a lot of time. There are 272 games played by 32 players over 18 weeks. There are 26,000 factors they need to consider when putting that schedule together, which yields 1 quadrillion permutations of the NFL schedule, right?
I don't even know how many zeros that is, but
15.
That's a lot.
I counted 15 zeros. And so sitting there thinking about that, we tell that story about we are able to help them process and optimize to come up with, the optimized schedule every season. We don't tell that story because we think there's a lot of scheduling business to be had. We tell that story because we are making sense out of large volumes of complex data. And if we can do that for the NFL, we can do it for aerospace, for financial services, for healthcare, life sciences, right? So we use it as a very powerful storytelling vehicle to tell stories that people want to listen to because it's about, Bundesliga or Formula One or the NBA, right? So it is, it's a very powerful tool. And again, we are very selective and, specific on the global properties we work with. And they do have to have that shared sort of commitment and ethos to innovation. We are not what I call logo slap sponsor. Yeah. It is the story first. It is the innovation we can drive together. That is the foundation for the partnerships we have.
So, and because of that, and that makes complete sense, but because of that dynamic, do you find that often a lot of the conversations when you talk to sports property, they always want to bring up that, basically?
Yes. Does everybody want money? Yes, they do. Are we doing it all the time? No, no. I mean, we're being very selective about that because
unless you're the NFL or one of the major properties, and you've got that story to tell, you've got the reach and audience. You're not going to move the needle for someone. There's a lot of different tech companies, not just. This is a globally unified view of the sports tech space, and I think my message to people who keep looking at tech as a sponsorship vehicle rather than an innovation vehicle is you're holding yourself back by doing so quite a lot. So just keep that in mind.
You? Now you're going to come and say that I'm going to steal that line. It's exactly right. This is something you have to invest in for your own future and growth, right?
I think the industry is holding itself back so much because it is so enamored with the idea of getting an extra sponsorship deal out of a tech company. I've actually written a post that I don't know if I've ever posted on LinkedIn that I've been ready to share, which is about that very topic and for them to get their head out of the sand. But anyway, I digress.
No, but I love that. And it's sort of this, like, we'll pick it up and port it around sort of thing that's really disruptive to the business too, right? And my favorite thing is an executive from the PGA Tour said this. He said, we decided to find the best technical partner we could. It didn't matter who was going to write the check, the biggest check. We just wanted the right partner because we knew that was going to help us accelerate outcomes and drive business value long term. Very happy to report that they chose us, AWS. But it was that mentality, right? Of like, this is a long-term play. This isn't a paycheck to paycheck sponsorship check sort of thing. This is something we need to invest in for the future of our sport.
I think that sometimes is, again, lost on some of the people that see those relationships. They think it's purely done because there's a marketing relationship there, but actually it's normally the other way around. They go, okay, you guys will be able to do what we need. Let's talk about it, expanding on that relationship rather than the other way around. I want to wrap up on, we've talked a lot about the NFL, as you said, but there's also a lot of others we pointed to. Are there any other examples of either things that you've achieved or innovations you're working on with sports properties that you would want to share that I think are good examples of what people can do?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, F1, we have some really exciting and interesting applications with generative AI too. They have in their broadcast center, at any given time, something could go wrong. So they've developed a multi-agent system that helps detect potential issues in the broadcast and then automatically route them, and you're seeing triage times reduce and resolution times increase. So you're seeing operational efficiency use cases, again, leveraging AI in Formula One. They've also obviously done a lot in the analytics space, redesigning the car based on the data. The National Basketball Association, we're working with them on creating their fan analytics platform and a lot of other soon to be discussed initiatives that are really exciting. PGA Tour has done tremendous work in content creation and broadcast technology and golf data technology, and the things that they're doing to extract data off of a course are mind-boggling. So then obviously everything here that Bundesliga has done and is doing. The great part about this job is the work is never done, right? And our customers and our partners are always challenging us, and we are also challenging them. And so that's a really good place to be.
Well, I look at the companies you've talked about, and I generally think if anyone was to take stock of where their innovations lie around broadcast, around media rights, they are some of the most innovative companies in the world around the space. And as someone who talks about this stuff all the time, the PGA Tour, I think over-indexes on the value they extract from their rights. The NFL clearly does. The F1 has also been growing and has got a huge deal with Apple for a reason. So just again, reiterating that investing into the tech side of things, the back-end infrastructure, and the stuff that might not sound as exciting is actually the stuff that's going to get you to the exciting end goal of getting more innovation and potentially more revenue at the other end, which is always nice.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Julie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit more about AWS. Thank you.